This is Miss Humbert here. Today we're going to be doing Unit 1, Notes 5. So we're going to be talking about graphing inequalities. Now before we graph inequalities, I want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with graphing. So let's just take a look at example number 1. So when you're doing this, remember when it's in slope-intercept form, that makes it pretty easy to graph, okay? So you're crossing the y-axis at 5. So you're going up 5 on the y-axis. Then your slope is -3, which is the same as -3 over 1. So from this point, you're going down 1, 2, 3, and over 1. And you're going to go ahead and plot that point. So then what you're going to do is connect the two dots and make your line. Now remember, for problems like example number 2, you have to actually solve the equation for y in order to graph it. So since that's a negative x, the first thing I'm going to do is add x to both sides. And then I get 3y is equal to x plus 6. Now that 3 is being multiplied by the y, so to get rid of it, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So then I get that y is equal to x divided by 3, which I'm going to actually write as 1/3 x, because that makes it a little easier to see the slope. And 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So then we're crossing the y-axis at 2, which is right here. And then our slope is 1/3. So from the 2, what we're going to do is we're going to go up 1 and over 3, and we're going to plot that point. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect those two dots. Okay? Now, whenever you have something that's either just x equals or just y equals, you're either going to have a horizontal or a vertical line. If you have just strictly y is equal to, then you're going to have a horizontal line. Well, here we have x is equal to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 5 on the x-axis. Well, 5 on the x-axis is right here. And remember, x is the horizontal one. And then through that, I'm going to draw a vertical line, which looks like that. So that concludes our kind of review. Now what I want you to do is I do want you to write down these actual steps, but before we do that, I just want to remind you of the symbols that you wrote down in Unit 1, Notes 2. So hopefully you still have that note sheet, because Unit 1, Notes 2 will help you a lot in terms of the word problems in this section and the next section after that. So it might help you to have those out in front of you. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the steps. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys kind of write the steps down as we do number 4. So remember, you can always pause the video if I am talking too fast for you. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, your first step, is to put the equation into slope-intercept form. Okay, well for number 4, it's already in slope-intercept form. So we can pick, or we can keep that as it is. So we can go ahead and move on to the second step. So the second step is to decide what type of line to make. So it's a dotted line if the inequality doesn't have a line underneath it. And it's going to be a solid line if the inequality does have a line underneath it. So I'm seeing that our inequality has a solid line underneath it, so I know that I need to draw a solid line. Now let's take a look at our third step here. So our third step is to decide where to shade. Okay, so you're going to shade up if the alligator is eating the y. So again, we're pretending the y is over here. Okay, and you're going to shade down if it's facing away from the y. Well, it looks like on this one it's facing down. Now, if that's confusing to you to decide where to shade, just pick a point on one side and plug it in for y and x. And if it works, great, shade that side. If it doesn't, shade the other side. And the last step, your fourth step, is to simply graph the inequality. And that's where we're at right now. So we're crossing the y-axis at 3. Now that's right here. And then my slope is 2 over 1. So I'm going to go up 2 and over 1. Now connecting those two lines, I'm going to use a solid line. That was a terrible solid line. Please pretend that the dots actually connect, okay? So then, since the alligator is facing away from the y, I need to shade down. So what I like to do is I like to put my pencil on a spot on the line. Then what I do is I just drag straight down. So since that's the region where my pencil landed in, that's the region I'm going to shade. Again, feel free to plug in a test spot if that's confusing to you. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. Well, first of all, I know that I'm going to need a dotted line because there's no line underneath the inequality. And then, since it's facing the y, I'm going to be shading up. So let's go ahead and let's graph this line now. So we're crossing the y-axis at a -6, which is right here. Now, since there's no slope written, that's the same as the slope being 1 over 1. So then I'm going up 1 over 1 from that point, up 1 over 1. Now, to connect those dots, I need to use a dashed line. Okay, since the alligator's facing towards the Y, I need to shade up. So I'm going to pick a spot on my line, and I'm going to go straight up from it. And then I'm going to shade in the region that I landed for number 5. Okay. All right, let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, we're going to be using a solid line because there's a solid line underneath the inequality. So we're crossing the y-axis at 2. That's going to be here. Okay. Then your slope is, right here. So then your slope is -4 or -4 over 1. So from this point right here, you're going to go down 4 and right 1. So to connect those two lines, I'm going to use a solid line because there's a solid line underneath the inequality. Now, I notice that the alligator is facing towards the Y, which means I need to shade up. So I'm going to pick a spot on the line and go up from it. And I see that I land in this region right here. Okay. Now taking a look at number 7 is going to be a dotted line because there is no inequality underneath. So I'm crossing the y-axis at a -2. And then I'm going up 1 and over 2. Up 1 and over 2. So now to connect those, I'm going to use a dashed line. Okay, now the alligator is facing towards the Y, so I'm going to shade up. So I'm going to be shading in this region right here. Now let's go ahead and let's take a look at numbers 8 and 9. Now in order to graph these, we need to put them into slope-intercept form. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract that 3x so it's on the other side. And then I get -2y is greater than -3x minus 6. Now that -2 is being multiplied by the y. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by a -2. Again, if you think back to Unit 1, Notes 2, we talked about if you ever multiply or divide by a negative number when you're doing inequalities, you need to flip the symbol. So I'm going to make this a less than symbol. So this is going to become 3/2 x. Since they're both negative, it's going to become a positive. And -6 divided by -2 is a positive 3. So when I go to graph, what I want to do is use this version right here. You always want to use your ending version. So you're crossing the y-axis at 3. Okay, so then your slope is 3/2. So you're going to go up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2. And you're going to graph that. Up 1, 2, 3, and over 2. Now, I'm still going to have a dashed line since there's no solid line underneath my inequality symbol. But notice at my ending version, after I solve for y, that the alligator's facing away from the y, which means I need to shade down from the original line. Okay, and that's your final answer for number 9. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 8, sorry. So let's take a look at number 9. So the first thing I want to do is get that 5x over to the other side. Since it's a positive 5x, I'm going to subtract 5x. So then I get 2y is less than or equal to -5x plus 10. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Well, I'm dividing by a positive 2, so my inequality symbol is going to stay the same. I get -5/2 x, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So what we do know is we know that we are crossing the y-axis at a positive 5. So I'm crossing the y-axis right here. Then what we want to do is we have -5 over 2. So here I'm going down 5 and right 2. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a solid line through that. Okay? Then, since the alligator's facing away from the Y, I'm going to shade down. Shout out to Mr. Tashida for the announcement. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shade that in. Okay? Now let's take a look at number 10. So for number 10, again, you're going to have to solve for Y. So the first thing I want to do is subtract 3x from both sides. So then I get y is greater than or equal to -3x minus 6. Okay, so here we're crossing the y-axis at a -6. So that's going to be right here. Then we're going down 3 and right 1. Well, I notice that I can't go down 3 and right 1 because I'm off the graph. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go up 3 and left 1. And then I'm going to connect a solid line. And then, since the alligator's eating the y, I need to shade up from the line. So that's going to land right here. Then, taking a look at number 11, that -2 is being multiplied by the y. So we're going to divide both sides by a -2. So remember that when you divide by that negative number, you need to flip the symbol. 4 divided by -2 is -2, and then x. -10 divided by -2 is a +5. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 5. And then my slope is -2 over 1. So I'm going down 2 and right 1. And then I'm going to connect with dashed lines. Okay, then since the alligator's eating the y, I'm going to be shading up. So that concludes your note video for today, and you can go ahead and start the practice once you're done. Thanks for listening.